NRL tips for round 25 Wooden Spoon are still up for grabs. The minor premiership is pretty much all but done after last week. We got 2 more games for SJ, so there's still a lot to play for, even for the teams at the bottom end of the ladder especially. We've got so much to play for over the next few weeks, so let's get into the final few tipping rounds of the year. Luke Brooks returns to Leichhardt on Thursday night, and as I mentioned, the Wooden Spoon race is back on once again. The Tigers and Eels are now tied on 5 wins. The Tigers get the bye next week, and then they play the Eels in the final round. So hoping that the Tigers and Eels don't win another game that sets up a spoon ball. And while I probably don't see the Eels winning another game, I do think the Tigers actually have a real good chance in this one. If any team has a tendency to get complacent, it is Manly. We've seen it the last few weeks against the Raiders and against the Warriors. They rely on their talent to get the job done. They go in, they don't look great for the first half, and then they just wait for a great play from a Tommy Talau, a Tommy Turbo, a Luke Brooks, or a DCE. And the Tigers, while they haven't been great, if they can just show a bit of ticker and just push back on Manly a little bit, if Benji can get the right defensive scheme, they could win. And let's be honest, the NRL script probably has Tigers absolutely destroying Manly when Luke Brooks returns to Leichhardt. That is how NRL being rigged work. At least on paper, there is absolutely no reason, and considering they are also playing for a top 4 spot, that Manly should lose this game. But there's just something about it, and if there's an upset alert, it's probably going to be on this game. I'm obviously tipping Manly, but holy heck, I am so nervous. The Wars taking on the Doggies. SJ farewells his final game at Go Media Stadium, and of course it's a Friday 6 p.m, and it's a shame the Warriors fell off, because this could have been a really good fixture. Obviously got the team that everyone was a fan of last year taking on probably the new bandwagon in the Doggies. If you're going off consistent performances, the Bulldogs are your best bet when it comes to the teams that are probably the most consistently good outside of the top 3. Obviously, Manly and Cowboys, you'd probably say, have the better rosters, but damn, the Doggies are looking fine. And outside of it being SJ's final game, there is no reason why the Doggies shouldn't win. Obviously, that SJ factor is huge, and I'm going to feel silly if the Warriors don't get the win here, but I just feel like the Doggies have been so good, and every time we think they're going to fall off, they come out and have an absolutely incredible performance. So, with their top 4 hopes still on the line, there's no way I cannot pass up on the Bulldogs. The Broncos taking on the Eels, a huge game, probably not Friday night prime time worthy, but the Broncos, well, they've fallen off the bandwagon. They got that win against the Cowboys, and surprisingly, despite everyone telling me that they had no chance after the Titans game, there's still actually a chance of playing finals. So NRL commentators, can we stop writing off teams when they lose one game 6 weeks until finals, because you're absolutely screwing me up. I think the Eels, unfortunately, they're probably just waiting for that Tigers game. I think the Broncos, a couple of weeks ago, you probably backed the Eels just a little bit, and to be fair, against the Panthers, if the Eels can play like that, they should get the job done here. The battle of 2 of the most disappointing teams in the competition, but at least on paper, this Broncos team still absolutely is miles better than the Eels. And back at home, back on Channel 9, the Brisbane Broncos, I cannot not tip them. The Raiders taking on the Panthers. The Raiders, well, their finals hopes, they're hanging on so tight. They have to win their last few games, and well, their draw is absolutely incredibly difficult. Taking on the Penrith Panthers, not only can I not remember the last time they lost 2 games in a row, but maybe Nathan Cleary taking a back seat until finals is going to help them find a bit of form, because to be fair, they have played most of the season without him in there. Jerome Luai goes back to 7. It's at Canberra, which unfortunately for the Raiders has meant absolutely nothing this year. Ricky has found a way to overperform with this roster and consistently make the 8, but going up against Penrith, who probably want to hang on to second with the Roosters breathing down their neck to get that first week of finals and what would be the farewell to Bluebet Stadium, I can't see Penrith losing this one. The Storm taking on the Finns, and the Finns are similar to the Raiders. However, the Finns, they've been in the top 4 for most of the season. Now they find themselves out of the top 8 entirely, and they probably had to get one of those scalps the past few weeks. They got to go play Melbourne. Now, Melbourne coming off such a huge emotional win and such a huge emotional high. Maybe they're vulnerable against the Dolphins. Look, I give the Dolphins a much better shot than I would have given the Dragons just 2 weeks ago. And the Dolphins are fighting for the 8, whereas Melbourne, they've probably got the minor premiership wrapped up at this point. But not tipping Melbourne in footy tipping is basically giving away free money. So I'm going to take the Melbourne Storm. Bunnies taking on the Knights. The Knights similar to the Finns and the Raiders. So Super Saturday sees maybe the end for 3 teams this season. They're taking on the Bunnies, and the Bunnies, well, they're fallen off. It is at a core, and to be honest, the Bunnies and Bulldogs, not so much the Doggies, but more so the Rabbitohs at a core, might be the least impactful home field advantage in the entire competition. competition. The Knights, unfortunately, a 1-point loss to the Sharks is probably something that isn't too bad, but considering how many outs the Sharks actually have, it is quite concerning. Either way, none of these teams really are doing anything at the end of this season, so I'm just going to go with the Newcastle Knights because they're at least playing for something. The Titans taking on the Roosters. Again, the Titans, their season's probably over as the Roosters. They're trying to catch Penrith because while the Roosters have struggled against Penrith no matter what and probably do get smacked around in week 1, they probably fancy themselves a lot better at Allianz instead of at Bluebet. I mean, the Roosters team on paper, it's just so good, and unless they're taking on a Storm or a Penrith or at least Manly or the Dogs if they can go with their forwards, which, let's be honest, on paper is not realistic, I think that Sam Walker and Luke Keary get the job done here and can put a ton of points on. It's just going to be against these big defensive teams when they're going to have to rely on their long kicking game that I don't think they get the job done. Obviously, that's a different topic because when it comes to them playing the Titans, who love to play that let's score 40 to 30 type of game, I see the Roosters absolutely pounding them. And finally, the South Coast Derby, the Dragons taking on the Sharks. And look, I think the Sharks are vulnerable in this game. However, I am going to tip them because since round 9, the Dragons have gone win-loss, win-loss. It is one of the great rugby league patterns of all time. It's a pattern that saw them, when they had everything to play for, get done by the Bulldogs, but then again, they somehow beat Melbourne in Melbourne. So I'm going to take the Sharks literally just because of that pattern. So round 25, there are my tips. We're getting to the pointy end of the season. Origin as well and truly in the rearview mirror. And the Storm 1-12, Newcastle 1-12, the Roosters by 50,000, and the Cronulla Sharks 1-12. Ladies and gentlemen, let me know in that comment section down below. What are your tips for round 25 of the 2024 NRL season? And I'll see you in the next one.